What happens when a moment of pride and secrecy turns into an unraveling disaster? How does one lie, made in the heat of a bad night, come back to destroy a marriage, revealed at a family dinner with everyone watching? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Mira, and I always thought I had control of everything. I used to believe that if I just stayed clever enough, just manipulative enough, I could keep things in my life exactly the way I wanted them. But lately, nothing felt the way it used to. Leo and I had been married for 8 years, and somewhere along the way, we stopped talking. He used to be the man who knew everything about me. The way I liked my coffee, the shows I would binge watch, the way I liked my cereal extra crispy. But now, when I walked into the room, I barely felt like he saw me. He worked late, came home tired, and would collapse onto the couch like it was the only place he could find peace. I couldn't blame him for it. Work had been tough for him too, but all that quiet, it was suffocating, and I was craving something more, something real. Something that didn't involve long silences and distant gazes. It all started innocently enough, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I had started feeling invisible, like Leo didn't notice me the way he once did. I spent so many nights staring at my reflection, wondering what had happened to the woman I used to be. The woman full of life and fire, who Leo once called his best friend. But where had that woman gone? It was a Friday night when I first saw him. Matt, the bartender, was smiling at me like he saw something more than just a woman ordering a drink. He was a little younger than me, maybe around 29, but his smile was disarming, and his eyes locked onto mine in a way that made me feel seen, in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't plan to do anything. I wasn't the type to flirt, I knew better. But when I walked up to the bar, my lips parted and words came out without thinking. "I'm single tonight," I blurted, not sure what to expect. He just smiled, leaning in closer to take my order. The way his hand brushed mine made me feel something I hadn't felt in so long. Desire. He laughed as he handed me my drink. "Single tonight, or single all the time," he teased. I couldn't stop myself. I laughed, a little too loudly maybe. It felt good to laugh again, to feel like myself. And just like that, we began talking. He was easy to talk to. He didn't push, didn't make me feel like I was being judged. For the first time in months, I felt like I mattered again, like someone actually cared to hear me. We talked about everything. My work, my life, Leo, and our marriage, though I didn't go into much detail. The conversation flowed naturally, and before I knew it, the night had passed. I'd had too many drinks and my head felt fuzzy. Matt asked if I wanted to get out of there. I hadn't planned on anything happening, but when he touched my arm, a spark ran through me and I couldn't resist. So, when he asked if I wanted to go to his place, the words "sure" escaped my lips before I could stop myself. I told myself it didn't matter. I hadn't cheated, at least that's what I kept telling myself. It was just one night of feeling alive. Leo didn't care about me anymore, not in the way I needed, so why shouldn't I have a little fun? I deserved it. After all, Leo was the one who had become distant. He'd been neglecting me for months, shutting me out emotionally. Matt's apartment was small, but it was nice. He put on some music, and we sat down on his couch, the warmth of his body next to mine igniting something inside me. We kissed, and I forgot everything except the way his lips felt, the way his hands made me feel beautiful again. I didn't stop it, and when it happened, I didn't regret it. At least not in that moment. Afterward, as I lay in the bed beside him, I told myself it didn't mean anything. I wasn't in love with Matt. He was just someone who'd made me feel alive for a few hours. That was all. When I left the next morning, I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again. It was just a one-time thing. I would go home, Act like everything was normal and Leo would never know. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared of facing Leo when I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. The guilt started creeping in as I left Matt's apartment, walking back to my car with the memory of what had happened already fading. It was like I had stepped outside of myself for a night. Was that what I wanted? To escape my life for a while? Leo didn't ask me any questions when I got home. He didn't say anything at all. His back was turned to me, and I was reminded of how far apart we had grown. We didn't talk about the night, or the week before, or anything else. He just kept working. I stayed silent, pretending nothing had happened. The next few days were a blur. Work was demanding, and Leo kept to his routine, silent, distant, too tired to fight, too uninterested to engage. It felt like the silence between us was growing deeper, swallowing us whole. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. It wasn't just that I had cheated, it was that I wasn't happy. Not really. And then came the night when I couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell Leo the truth. I don't know why I thought it would fix things. Maybe I thought that if I confessed, if I came clean, Leo would forgive me. Maybe I was hoping he'd be able to see how much I needed him, how much I wanted him to fight for me. But instead, I blurted out everything. Every detail, every moment of that night. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the fact that I'd been feeling neglected and alone. And in my mind, it was Leo's fault. We were at a family dinner, celebrating his birthday, surrounded by people we both knew. I thought it would be the perfect time to finally tell him. I expected shock, maybe even anger, but instead, I saw his eyes go cold. His face remained blank, like he had already made up his mind. The table went silent as I spoke. I didn't expect the room to freeze like that, or the looks I got from everyone around me. My stomach churned. Leo didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stood up, placed some money on the table, and walked out of the restaurant without a word. The door closed behind him softly, but it felt like the loudest noise I'd ever heard. And that was the moment I realized everything was changing. The air in the restaurant felt thick, heavy, like a fog had rolled in the moment Leo stood up and walked out. I sat there, surrounded by the stunned faces of family and friends, trying to hold back the rising panic in my chest. What had I just done? What did I think would happen when I confessed in front of everyone? For a moment, I told myself it didn't matter. Leo was just shocked, maybe embarrassed, but I had been honest. I didn't think it would break us. I couldn't have. The confession, the public admission of what I had done, was supposed to shock him into action. It was supposed to make him wake up and realize how far apart we had drifted. I wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to be angry enough to pull me back into his arms and demand I choose him over everything else. But he didn't do that. He just walked out, quietly, calmly, like he had already decided that this was the end. I sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table as I tried to regain some control over myself. I wanted to follow him, to beg him to come back, to tell him it wasn't as bad as it sounded, that I was still his. But I didn't move. Instead, I laughed awkwardly, a nervous laugh that sounded fake even to my own ears. "It's fine," I said, forcing a smile, my voice a little too high. "He'll be okay. He's just processing." But no one was convinced. Sophia, my sister, looked at me with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she was confused. Leo's mother, Ruth, hadn't even touched her food, her face a mixture of concern and disbelief. My coworker, Leah, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, glancing at Julian, who had been silent since I'd dropped my bombshell. I tried to keep the situation light, but the truth was, I didn't know what I was doing anymore. Leo's absence at the table was a gaping hole in the evening, and I couldn't ignore the fact that everything was falling apart. The waiter came over, a little hesitant. "Would you like me to box up your meals?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost as if he were afraid to disturb the fragile moment. I shook my head, forcing a smile. No, just bring the check, please. The sound of the check hitting the table seemed so final, like a verdict being handed down. As I sat there, waiting for the check to be paid, I kept trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why had Leo left? Wasn't this supposed to bring us closer? Wasn't honesty supposed to fix things? But all I saw was his retreat, the quiet way he had walked out, leaving me with my family and friends, staring after him, unsure of how to react. I couldn't go after him. I couldn't explain it away. Not now, not after I had laid it all out there. My confession had been meant to spark a confrontation, a showdown, something to break the silence that had consumed our marriage. But instead of a fight, I got silence from Leo, and that silence was deafening. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. What had I expected? That Leo would shout, or cry, or beg me to stay. Maybe deep down I had hoped he would. Maybe I wanted him to make a scene so that I could feel like I still mattered to him. But now, in the quiet of the car, I realized that silence wasn't weakness. It wasn't him giving up. It was him stepping back, creating space, and I didn't know how to fill that space. When we got home, Leo's car was gone. It was almost like he'd evaporated, leaving no trace behind except for the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the house. His shoes were gone, and his jacket was missing. It was as if he had planned it. I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. Should I text him, call him? But what would I say? Sorry? That didn't seem like enough. I wasn't even sure I was sorry. Instead, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, my hands shaking just slightly as I lifted the glass to my lips. The cool liquid burned as it slid down my throat, and I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the thoughts swirling in my mind. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I had pushed Leo for so long, trying to get a reaction out of him, trying to get him to show me that he still cared, still wanted me. But now that I had his attention, I didn't know how to handle it. I stayed up late that night, pacing around the house, waiting for Leo to come home. But he didn't. Hours passed, and I felt more and more like I was losing him for good. When I finally went to bed, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just destroyed everything. The silence was unbearable now, and every time I heard a noise, I hoped it would be him walking through the door. But it never was. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Leo's side of the mattress was cold, untouched, and his pillow was still perfectly fluffed. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This wasn't just a momentary argument. This wasn't him just needing time to process. This was something deeper, something that couldn't be undone. I checked my phone, hoping for a message, a sign that Leo was at least willing to talk. But there was nothing. No texts, no missed calls. Just an empty screen that made my heart race in a way that was almost painful. I went about my morning, moving mechanically through the motions, trying to focus on anything but the emptiness that filled the house. But it was impossible to ignore. At some point, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the calendar on the wall. A strange thought crossed my mind. What if Leo had already started making plans? What if he had already decided that he didn't want this anymore? What if he was already looking for a way out? The thought made my stomach churn, and I stood up quickly, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. I had to know what was going on. I had to do something to fix this. I pulled out my phone, dialing Leo's number. The phone rang once, twice. Then it went to voicemail. I hung up, frustration building. I tried again and again, but it was the same result. He wasn't answering. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hands, trying to figure out what to do next. But the truth was, I didn't have a plan anymore. I didn't know how to fix this, and that scared me more than anything else. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I went to work, did what I needed to do, but my mind was never really there. I kept thinking about Leo, where he was, what he was doing, and whether or not he would ever come back to me. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, mentally drained. I opened the door, half expecting to see Leo standing there, waiting for me. But he wasn't. The house was just as quiet as it had been before, and I was left standing there, alone with my thoughts, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. It was then that I knew. I couldn't undo the damage I had done. The silence between us wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything. The years of neglect, the emotional distance, the choices I had made that had led me to this point, and I had no idea how to fix it. The silence was unbearable, the kind that gnaws at you, slowly digging into the space between two people until you can't remember what it was like to fill that gap with conversation. For days, Leo and I barely exchanged words. I couldn't figure out if he was punishing me or if he had simply given up on me entirely. Either way, it was clear that the connection we had once shared was slipping through my fingers, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a way to hold on. I'd told myself that this was just a phase, that Leo needed time to process what had happened. But as the days wore on and his silence continued, I began to wonder if I was kidding myself. Was this the end of everything? Was my marriage over? I spent the next few days in a haze of frustration and self-loathing, trying to convince myself that I hadn't really done anything wrong. I had been honest, hadn't I? I had told Leo everything, laid it all out on the table. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that honesty wasn't enough. Not anymore. There was more to it than that. I had pushed Leo for so long, prodding him, hoping that he would finally show some emotion, some sign that he still cared. But when I got it, when he finally did react, it wasn't the way I wanted. He hadn't begged me to stay. He hadn't fought for me. He hadn't even yelled. He just walked away. And that's what hurt the most. I had always known that Leo wasn't the type to raise his voice, to make a scene. He was calm, controlled, always so careful with his words and actions. But I had never realized just how deeply that control went until that night. His silence was a kind of strength I couldn't break through, a wall that was higher and thicker than anything I could have imagined. I tried calling him again, over and over, each time praying that he would pick up, that he would let me fix this, but there was nothing. His phone went straight to voicemail, every single time. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, needed to know what was going on inside his head. I couldn't just keep living in limbo, hoping that he would suddenly come back to me. I needed to understand why he had walked away in the first place, and I needed to know if there was a way to fix it. It was late in the afternoon when I finally decided to confront him. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine, like I wasn't falling apart inside. I had to see him. I had to talk to him face to face. I grabbed my keys, quickly checked the time, and ran out the door, heading straight for the office. When I arrived at Leo's office building, I was already shaking. I told myself that I wouldn't cry, that I would stay calm, stay composed. But the closer I got to his floor, the more the anxiety bubbled up inside me. I took a deep breath before stepping into the elevator, trying to steady my nerves. I knew I had to get to him before I lost my nerve entirely. I found his office at the end of a long hallway. The door was cracked open, and I could see the faint glow of his desk lamp through the crack. I knocked lightly, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. There was no answer at first, and I was about to turn around and leave when I heard his voice from inside. "Mira," he said quietly, almost too quietly. "What are you doing here?" His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even upset. It was distant, like he was talking to a stranger, not the woman he had shared his life with for so many years. "I need to talk to you," I said, stepping into the office without waiting for him to invite me in. "We need to talk." He didn't move at first, just sat there behind his desk, staring at the papers in front of him. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders were set rigid. It was like he was trying to make himself smaller, to disappear. But I wouldn't let him. "Leo, please," I said, my voice shaking now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have done what I did, but I need you to understand. I didn't mean to hurt you. I needed something. I was lonely. I felt invisible. He didn't say anything for a long time, just kept his eyes on the papers in front of him. I waited for him to look at me, to say something, anything. But he remained silent. I know I can't take back what I did, I continued, but I want to fix this. I want to make it right, Leo. Please don't walk away from me. He finally lifted his head, but his eyes weren't filled with the anger or hurt I had expected. Instead, they were cold, distant, unreadable. I'm not walking away, Mira, he said calmly. I'm just choosing how to deal with this. His words hit me like a slap in the face. What does that mean? I whispered, barely able to get the words out. It means, he began, his voice low and steady, that I'm not going to let you control the narrative anymore. I'm not going to play the role of the victim in this marriage anymore. And I'm not going to let you manipulate me into forgiving you just because you're sorry now. I took a step back, stunned by the coldness in his words. This wasn't the Leo I knew. This wasn't the man who would listen to me, who would comfort me when I was upset. This was someone else, someone who was done with me. I'm not trying to control anything, I said, my voice breaking. I just want us to go back to the way things were. I want us to be happy again. Leo's expression softened, just a little, but it wasn't enough to erase the distance between us. You can't go back, Mira. Not after everything that's happened. I've already started making plans. I'm not going to pretend like nothing's wrong anymore. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. Leo wasn't going to forgive me. He wasn't going to just brush this aside like I had hoped. He was already moving forward, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Leo continued, his tone still calm. I'm going to make sure everything is handled properly. This isn't something we can just fix with a few words, Mira. It's too late for that. The words sank in, one after another, like a heavy weight pressing down on me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel my breath quicken. I didn't know what to say anymore. The man I had hoped would fight for me, fight for our marriage, was already planning his exit. I'm sorry, I said again, but this time it felt hollow, like an empty promise. I know you are, Leo replied, standing up from his desk, but sorry doesn't change what's already been done. With that, he walked out of the office without another word, leaving me standing there, alone and defeated. I stood in Leo's office for what felt like an eternity after he left. His words kept echoing in my mind, reverberating like an unforgiving drumbeat. I've already started making plans. I'm not going to pretend like nothing's wrong anymore. He'd already spoken to a lawyer. He was already planning his exit, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, grasping for some sense of control over a situation that was spiraling beyond my reach. I don't know how long I stood there, but by the time I left, the weight of what had just happened was sinking in. Leo was done. He was moving forward, and nothing I said or did could change that. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. The office, with its sterile, quiet walls, suddenly felt like a tomb. I had no idea how I was going to face him when I got home, or if there was even a home left for us. As I walked back to my car, I tried to think of something, anything, to salvage this. I could still fix it, I told myself. I could find a way to make Leo understand. He was just hurt, just angry. He'd come around, right? He had to. He loved me. He had to still love me. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The drive home felt like it took forever. Every red light seemed to drag me into the pit of despair deeper. Every thought that flashed through my mind only made me feel more desperate. How did everything go so wrong? It felt like I was living in a nightmare where nothing I did could wake me up. I couldn't turn back time. I couldn't fix what had happened. When I arrived home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Leo's absence filled every corner. The familiar sound of his keys jangling, the soft click of the door opening, the shuffle of his shoes in the hallway, none of it. It was just the emptiness, the same silence that had started to consume us months ago. I went inside, my steps slow and hesitant, like I was walking through a fog. The smell of dinner, cold, untouched, lingered in the kitchen. Leo had always been the one to cook when we stayed in. It had become one of his little rituals, one I hadn't noticed until now. Tonight, there was no sign of him at the stove, no plates set for two. The house felt hollow without him. I paced around the living room, wondering where he'd gone. He hadn't even said where he was headed after he left. Was he at his parents' house? Did he even tell anyone where he was going? Or was he just avoiding me entirely? I pulled out my phone and tried calling him again, but the same result, straight to voicemail. I was so close to sending him a message, begging him to talk to me, but I stopped myself. I knew it would be futile. He had already made up his mind. The truth was, I had already crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and he was no longer willing to forgive me. That night, I went to bed alone. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, images of Leo walking out of that restaurant flashed before me. His face, blank, unreadable, staring at me as if I were a stranger, and every time I tried to push those thoughts away, they came rushing back, overwhelming me with regret and fear. The next morning, I woke up to another cold, empty bed. I sat up, my head pounding from a restless night, and looked around the room. It was just as it had been the night before. No sign of Leo, no message, no phone call, nothing. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest again, and for a moment, I thought I might not be able to breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I couldn't escape them. I couldn't escape my own mind. I grabbed my phone again, staring at it, hoping for some kind of notification. Maybe he had finally texted me, maybe he was ready to talk, but nothing. Just the same empty screen. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him anymore. I needed to take control. I couldn't let everything fall apart, not without trying to fix it. So I got dressed quickly, not caring about how I looked, just needing to get out of the house. I had to find Leo. I had to talk to him. I knew exactly where he'd go. His favorite spot, the quiet park by the lake, the place he went when he needed to clear his head. I hadn't been there with him in months, but I knew he would go there when things got too heavy. I drove to the park, my heart hammering in my chest, praying that I would find him there. But when I arrived, the place was empty. The bench where we used to sit together, the one with the faded paint and the inscription we carved on our first anniversary, no one was there. I felt a strange, deep ache in my chest as I stood there, staring at the empty bench. I had been so sure, so certain that everything would go back to normal. I was convinced that if I just told him how sorry I was, if I could just make him see how much I needed him, he would come back to me. But now, standing in that quiet park, the weight of reality hit me harder than ever before. Leo wasn't coming back. He had already decided. I left the park feeling like a ghost, walking through my own life as if everything had already ended. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, almost afraid of what I would see. But it was just a message from Sophia. "Are you okay? I tried calling you last night, but you didn't pick up. Everyone's asking about Leo. Where is he? Is everything okay?" I stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. What could I say? That everything had fallen apart? That I had pushed Leo away and now he was gone for good? I didn't know how to tell her that. How could I explain to anyone that I had ruined everything? That I had made one terrible decision after another, and now I was paying the price? I didn't respond. Instead, I just put my phone away and kept walking, aimlessly, through the streets. I had no destination in mind, no real plan, other than trying to make sense of the mess I had created. When I got home, I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were shaking as I held the glass, and I closed my eyes for a moment, hoping that when I opened them again, things would be different. But they weren't. The silence in the house was louder than ever. It was like the walls themselves were judging me, reminding me of everything I had lost. And I realized, finally, that there was nothing I could do. Leo had made his decision, and now I was left alone, with nothing but the consequences of my actions. The days that followed were a blur, each one blending into the next in a haze of silence and uncertainty. I tried to keep up the facade that everything was fine, but it wasn't. It wasn't fine at all. The house, once filled with the sounds of our laughter, now felt like an empty shell. Leo hadn't come home, and he wasn't responding to my calls or messages. Each day, I woke up hoping that somehow things would be different, that somehow Leo would return, ready to forgive me. But every day the silence grew thicker, and I knew, deep down, that I was losing him for good. I spent the next few days distracted, barely able to focus on anything. At work, I was a ghost, going through the motions without really being present. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, how I had ruined everything with one stupid decision, how I had thrown away years of trust and love with one moment of weakness. The guilt gnawed at me, and it was a constant ache, one that I couldn't escape. I tried to convince myself that Leo's silence meant he still cared, that he was just processing things in his own way, but I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Leo wasn't coming back. I had pushed him too far, and I had no idea how to fix it. The silence was so loud now I could almost hear it in the walls. It followed me everywhere, at work, at home, even when I was out with friends. I couldn't escape it. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected a message from Leo, but there was nothing, not a word, and that terrified me. On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see him. I had to hear from him, even if it meant confronting the worst. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. I needed closure, even if it meant facing the truth that Leo was done with me. I drove to his office, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. I had to try to make him understand that I was sorry, that I never meant to hurt him. When I arrived, Leo's car wasn't in the parking lot. I waited for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing with the possibilities. Where was he? Had he gone to his parents' house? Was he avoiding me? I checked my phone again, hoping for some kind of message, but there was nothing. I could feel the frustration building inside me, the anger at myself for letting things get this bad. I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't just keep waiting. I had to take action. So, I drove to his parents' house. I knew it wasn't the best idea, but I couldn't think of anywhere else to go. I had to talk to him. When I arrived, I saw Leo's car parked in the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. He was here. I could finally see him, finally talk to him. I knocked on the door, my breath shallow, my mind spinning with what I was going to say. His mother answered, her face warm but tired. "Mira," she said, her voice gentle. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Leo," I said quickly, my words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Please, I just need to talk to him." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let me in. "He's in the living room," she said softly. "But he's not ready to talk to you." I nodded, my heart sinking. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't leave without at least trying. I walked into the living room, and there he was, sitting on the couch with his back to me. He didn't even look up when I entered. "Leo," I said softly, my voice shaking. Please look at me." He turned his head slowly, his eyes cold and distant. The look on his face made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness. It was something worse. It was nothing, complete indifference. "I can't do this anymore, Mira," he said, his voice low and steady. "I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I'm done." I felt a wave of panic rise up in my chest. "Leo, please," I begged. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I swear to you, I never wanted to. I was just so lonely." He finished for me, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You've said that before, Mira. But it doesn't change anything. You cheated, and no amount of explaining will change that. You don't get to fix this with a sorry. Not anymore. The finality in his voice made my heart shatter. I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat, and all I could do was stand there, staring at him, wishing that I could go back and undo everything. But I couldn't. I knew that now. The damage had been done. I never wanted this, I whispered, my voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I just needed to feel like I mattered again. Leo didn't respond. He just looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I've been preparing for this, he said quietly, almost to himself. I'm not angry, Mira. I'm not even sad. I'm just done. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, to beg him to understand, to beg him to come back to me. But I knew it was useless. He had already made his decision. I don't know what to say, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to fix this. Leo stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. You can't fix it, Mira. Not this time. And with that, he turned and walked away from me, leaving me standing in his parents' living room, alone. I stood there for a long time, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. He was done with me, and I knew deep down that there was nothing I could do to change that. I had lost him. The days that followed were a blur of denial, regret, and exhaustion. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop replaying everything that had led me to this point. Every moment, every choice, felt like it had been a misstep. I kept thinking that somehow Leo would change his mind, that he would realize how sorry I was, how much I wanted to fix this. But each time I reached out, the silence grew heavier. He didn't respond. Not with words, not with emotion, just cold, unyielding silence. It wasn't until the end of the week that I finally accepted the truth. Leo wasn't coming back. I had already pushed him too far. Every time I thought about the way he'd looked at me, so distant, so detached, it broke something inside me all over again. The Leo I had known, the man who would listen, who would fight for us, was gone. He wasn't coming back. And I was the one who had pushed him away. I spent those days at home, trying to occupy my mind with anything that would distract me. I cleaned, I organized, I watched shows I hadn't cared about in years, but none of it mattered. The truth kept creeping in, whether I wanted it to or not. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of my own guilt. I couldn't avoid the nagging thought that kept circling in my mind. What was Leo doing right now? Where was he? Was he already planning to move on? Had he already moved on? It felt like I was watching my life from the outside, a spectator to my own pain. I had destroyed everything I had once cared about, and now I was left with the aftermath. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the office. I couldn't face the world. Every time I saw a familiar face, I felt exposed, like they could see the guilt written across my forehead. I wanted to hide, to run away, but there was nowhere to hide from what I had done. Then, a message came. It wasn't from Leo, though. It was from his lawyer. I stared at the message for a long time before I opened it. My heart skipped a beat, and my hands shook as I read the words. Dear Mira, this letter is to inform you that my client, Leo Calderon, has initiated divorce proceedings. All necessary paperwork has been filed, and we request your immediate cooperation in the division of assets and custody arrangements regarding your shared property and financial obligations. We understand that this is a difficult time, and we hope that we can proceed amicably. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the next steps. Kind regards, Andrew Matthews, Esky. The weight of the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Divorce. I had known it was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it real. There was no more pretending, no more hoping. This was the end. I felt the tears welling up, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen of my phone, numb to everything around me. My life was unraveling, and I didn't know what to do next. There was no way to undo what had been done. I couldn't fix this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew I needed to act. I couldn't sit around and wait for this to happen to me. I had to take control. But how? How could I fix something so broken? For the next few hours, I wandered through the house, pacing, trying to figure out what I could do to stop the inevitable. I couldn't think straight. I tried calling Leo again, but as expected, it went to voicemail. I left a message, but I knew it was useless. He had made up his mind, and there was nothing I could say to change it. The next morning, I called Andrew Matthews, Leo's lawyer, to set up a meeting. The man on the other end of the line was polite but firm, and he scheduled me for an appointment the following day. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, and for the first time in days, I let the tears fall. I had nothing left. Everything I had built, everything I had worked for, was crumbling around me. When I showed up at the law office the next day, I felt like a shell of the person I had been just a few weeks ago. I walked into the cold, sterile office, and the receptionist directed me to a small conference room. Andrew Matthews was already sitting at the table, flipping through a file. He looked up when I entered, and there was no warmth in his gaze. He didn't need to say it. I could feel it in his eyes. He was here to do a job. He wasn't here to comfort me. "Mrs. Calderon," he said, his voice clinical, "please have a seat." I sat down across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. My throat felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, but I forced myself to sit still, to look professional. I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to plead. This was business now. I had to face the facts. "Leo has filed for divorce," Andrew began, his voice calm but firm. "We have already begun the process of asset division and custody arrangements. Leo has expressed his desire for full custody of the house and the shared accounts, including your savings. You'll need to make decisions about how to divide the rest of your assets." I barely heard the rest of what he said. His words were a blur, a series of phrases that meant nothing. I couldn't focus on anything except the reality that Leo was really gone, that the life I thought I would have forever was slipping through my fingers. I didn't say much during the meeting. I didn't have much to say. What was there to say? I had made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. But as I left the office, I realized that the worst part of this wasn't the divorce itself. It was the finality of it. There was no more hope, no more chances to fix things. There was no more us. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls. Leo's lawyer sent over the divorce papers, and I had to sign them. There was no fight, no argument, just the sound of my pen scratching against the paper, signing away everything I had once held dear. Leo and I were officially over. As I signed the final papers, I couldn't help but wonder how things could have gone differently. What if I hadn't pushed him so hard? What if I had been more patient, more understanding? Could I have saved my marriage? Or was it always going to end this way? I thought about the family dinner, the way Leo had looked at me when I confessed everything. That look wasn't anger, it was resignation. It was the moment when he knew he couldn't save us anymore. That was the hardest part to accept. Not that I had cheated, not that I had broken his trust, but that he had given up on us. And that was the moment when I realized I had truly lost everything.